Hey everyone, I hope you're doing well. It is Thursday, September 1st, 2022, and welcome to Artist Dream Life Sessions. Here I will be sharing how to build your life as an artist. I will be sharing the 8 foundational pillars and the 5 essential building blocks that I shared this past spring during our workshop. And today we're going to focus on number 2, which is to honor your natural creative flow. Before we get started, I'm actually going to go over all 8 of them so we can overview for those of you that didn't find the workshop this spring, and a reminder for those who were there. Okay, so the first foundational pillar is to prepare for the unexpected. As undesirable as it is, we have to remember that building your dream life is going to incorporate the undesirable at times, because obstacles are going to come against us when we are moving in the direction of the call that God has for our life. So knowing this firsthand is actually paramount to give you a strong foundation to persevere in spite of anything that's going to come against you. We must prepare our mind and our heart to take this leap and venture into the self-sustaining artist's life. It is not an easy journey. In fact, it is the road less traveled, because it does require a lot of faith. It requires great risk and sacrifice. So to know, firstly, that moving into this full-time direction you're going to be opposed is a good place to start. The second is to know your vision. Knowing our vision is essential. Our vision is the blueprint of our life. It is the visual of what we want to build. So having this blueprint and knowing what it is the most important and often most challenging first step to building your life as an artist. So here there are 3 main keys to remember. The first is to know your purpose, your calling, and your assignment. So your purpose is why you were put on earth. Your calling is what you are here to do. And usually this is 2 main parts. One is the passions and desires that you have intrinsically, and also the gifts and talents that you've been given, both naturally and spiritually. And bringing those 2 together is actually what makes up your calling in life. And your assignment is the vehicle or the avenue that you use to fulfill that calling while you're here. Number 2, what do you envision when you think of your dream life? Remember, our life is a gift. It is something that we choose to live, and there is a reason that we have intrinsically a vision of what we want to do and how we want to live our life. So having that as your template is going to help you understand how to get from where you are to where you want to go. Number 3 is, as I mentioned, the recipe, which is your gifts and talents. Combined with your desires and passions, bringing those 2 together is going to give you an amazing overview of why you're here and what it is that you want to do with your life. Number 3 is to honor our natural creative flow, which is where we're going to camp today. And this is the starting point when it comes to learning how to channel your creativity, and building your portfolio, building your catalog as a musician, building your body of work, whichever avenue of art that you flow from. and it starts with our natural creative flow, which we're going to come back to in just a moment. Number 4 is planning and strategy. This is essentially discipline. We need to have structure around our natural creative flow so that we can actually create and build, as I mentioned, our portfolio, our catalog, and our body of work that makes up our life. Okay, number 5 is actually the 5 essential building blocks to bringing all of this together. The first one is creating. Creating is the beginning of it all. So allowing your natural creative flow to function at its optimum is the starting point. Number 2 is to producing. So as I mentioned, once we have created something, we want to put structure around it to actually produce the work that we have created. Number 3 is publishing. Depending on what avenue of art you do, publishing will look very different, but publishing is essentially getting your work out so that others can benefit and be blessed from your work. Okay, number 4 is marketing, and that is essentially knowing your beneficiaries. As I mentioned in the artist workshop, we all have those who will benefit from what we have to give. So marketing really is taking your work and giving it to a specific group of people that you know will receive it and benefit from it. And number 5 is the actual audience themselves, the beneficiaries. So some of you already know this, some of you are already doing this, but for those of you that don't know, we all have those who will receive our work based on what their needs are and what their desires are, as well as what we feel our gifts, our talents, our passions and desires are. So all of this comes together at point number 5. Okay, and number 6 is distribution, publishing, copyrights, and ownership. And these are actually 4 separate and very detailed parts of getting your work out there. Okay, so ownership is essentially knowing your voice, knowing the power and the uniqueness of who you are, and knowing that there really is no price that you can put on that, because that is a God-given talent and gift that He's given to you. But obviously, as artists who want to make a living from our art and our creativity, there comes a point where we need to put a price on the work that we're distributing and publishing and copywriting. Okay, so let's move on to point number 7. That is income and revenue. Your income and revenue is going to be determined by how you build in number 5 and number 6, which is the 5 essential building blocks and publishing and copyright and distribution. So it can be as small or as big as you invest it to be. A lot of times we can get discouraged when we are not making the money that we feel we wanted to as artists when we're first starting out. But this is part of the process. So remember that whether you're doing this part-time or you're moving into a full-time creative work, it's going to take time, and it's going to be as successful as you are able to build in number 5 and number 6. Okay, and then point number 8 is enjoying the fruit of your labor at every step of the way. Clearly, when we finish a project, or we finished an artwork, or we finished a song, That is reason to celebrate because we have accomplished something. But here I'm encouraging us to remember to enjoy the process. Even before you've accomplished something, it's important to remember that you are doing this because you love to do this, and you want to encourage yourself along the way, especially when those obstacles and those roadblocks come against you to discourage you, to get you off path. It's important to remember to enjoy the fruit of your labor. Okay, so we are concentrating on honoring our creative flow. Now, it's important to remember that we are, and we create from the essence of self. So knowing self and knowing how we flow and function is very, very paramount to allowing our creativity to naturally come out and naturally flow. I think I shared in the workshop that a lot of times, if we do work outside of our creative work, there are times that that natural creative flow will be hindered to a point because we are essentially busy doing other work. So some of that really is a matter of learning how to channel that creative energy in a way that it doesn't get blocked or stagnant. But for those of you who are operating here in this full-time place or transitioning into full-time creative work, your starting point is to allow natural creative flow. And what that means is that when you feel inspired to create something, is when you create something. Now, this inspiration can be both positive and it can be negative, because remember that the entirety of self is composed and comprised of the brokenness of self and the wholeness of self. So learning how to tap into both parts of self is very important, and allowing that natural release however it comes out, so that when you bring your body of work together, it is an authentic compilation of your natural creative flow. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to share a little bit more in depth about how we are built. We are children of a creator. God himself is the creator. So he created us to flow in his image. And it really doesn't take much to understand that. You simply need to go outside and see the beauty and the canvas of nature to understand that God is a very creative being. There is color all around us. There is beauty all around us. And in the same way, we intrinsically carry that beauty and that desire to create that beauty. Some of us are visual artists, some of us are musicians, some of us are movement artists. I mean, there's a vast array of mediums and styles and types. But at the core, we all are creative. Those of you who stumble across this video who feel you're not creative, perhaps you just haven't channeled and tapped into that part of yourself. But creativity is something that we all carry. I think some of us just actually acknowledge that very heavily and identify with that very heavily, so we call ourselves artists. But I personally believe that we're all artists on some level. So we are spirit, soul, and body. Now, our spirit is intertwined and connected with our soul, and our soul is interconnected and intertwined with our body. So when we are creating, all three of these are engaged, and it really doesn't matter from where you're pulling, because one will affect the other, which will affect the other. As I mentioned, some of us, because of the style or the type of art that we do, we may be more physical with it, and others it may be more mental or emotional, but they all are interconnected. Okay, now what I'd like to talk about here a little bit deeper is the soul. So the soul is the mind, the will, and the emotions, and it is also the place where creativity is rooted in. There is a part of self that is not easily accessible, that actually is stimulated and ignited through creativity. So it is this part of self, which is the soul, that can both be completely free and liberated to flow, or it can be completely blocked and stagnant. So this is actually a good highlight for you if you're feeling like you might be in a place of, as writers would say, writer's block, or you just don't feel inspired to create. A lot of times that might have to do with something that you're wrestling with in the soul. So it is important to both acknowledge that the strength and the health of our soul is going to impact our natural creative flow. And at the same time, it's important to understand that allowing those times or those seasons where you don't feel inspired or you don't feel like the freedom to release art is probably a good time to actually dig a little bit deeper and allow the broken part of self to be released in other avenues, in other ways. I firmly believe in art and music as therapy and movement as therapy. So a lot of times, let's say you're a musician and your natural creative flow is through creating music or writing lyrics or singing, but there might be times that you don't feel you're motivated to do that, or you feel stagnant. I would encourage you to channel that blockage through another avenue of art that perhaps is not as natural or accessible to you. And there are many forms of that, which I can share in the future. But honoring our natural creative flow is number one and step number one when it comes to creating. Now, what's also important to remember is to have the balance of self. A lot of times when our spirit is agitated or feeling off kilter, that obviously affects our soul, which affects us physically. So establishing and having some practices or rituals that help you when you're feeling stressed or tired or anxious are very beneficial. And I'm going to share a few right now that I believe when we have those days or those times and seasons that we are able to incorporate these. So here's a few tips that I'm going to share with you that you can jot down and remember these. Number one is to make time for your spirit and your soul every morning before you start your day. For some of us, this is not natural. Some of us get up and we're in a hurry to get our day going, but actually the beginning of the day is when you're most aware and present in yourself because you've rested. So setting your mind and setting your mental space, setting your emotional space on something positive is actually beneficial for you, and it actually impacts your body as well. So here are some ways to remember this. Number one, take notice of how you wake up in the morning. It's important to honor where you are every day because every day is different. And you want to remember to adjust accordingly. So for example, if you wake up not feeling well, or you're sleep deprived because you didn't have a good rest the night before, or you're heavy in your mind because you're carrying stress from the day before, or something is happening in your life, it's important to adjust and honor where you are. So in other words, if you're tired, the last thing you want to do is force your body to function at full capacity when it's not there by superficially stimulating it or pushing beyond limits, because all that's going to do is perpetuate your healing from the night before. So that's number one. Number two is to establish a morning affirmation or a daily mantra that sets your mind on the right frequency. And this can look all kinds of ways. This can be something that you write for yourself to just kind of give you a focal point for the day, for a mental focal point. It can be a Bible verse or anything, but it's something that reminds you and that keeps you on that frequency of being level and being sober-minded. So these are two that you can incorporate. And before I move further, I'd like to say here that our mind and our emotions and our will are a domino effect of connection and influence. So how we think will influence how we feel, and how we feel will influence the decisions we make. So if you're wrestling with decisions and you're feeling uneasy about your day or how things are going, you need to step back and evaluate your emotional state. If your emotional state is off kilter, then you need to step back and evaluate, what am I thinking right now that is influencing how I feel, which is obviously influencing how I'm making decisions right now. Again, spirit, soul, and body. So the degree of health that our soul is in is going to impact our body, and so on and so forth. Okay, so number two is making time for your body every morning. Again, as I said, this might not come natural for some of us, but taking notice of how we wake up. Don't push ourselves past our physical limitations or exhaustion or illness or things like that. Be willing to make accommodations for your physical well-being. Okay? And again, I know part of it is that we're trained to always be on the go and always be doing and doing, but in actuality, that has caused more harm to us than learning how to pace. Okay? Number 2 is have a good nutritional routine and intake to get you started for the day. So again, this might not come natural for some of us, but try and establish at least one healthy part of your daily nutritional intake to give you that energy that you need to carry you through the first part of the day. This might require a little extra effort, but it is worth it because our bodies are our temple and they're the ones who carry the load for all of it. So, okay, so in the same way that we have a morning routine, we can have an evening routine. And here we want to make time to nurture our soul before bed. Number 1, establish a routine or ritual to help you release your day, spiritually, mentally, and emotionally. This is so vital and critical to remember to release the day. This is where I would encourage you to journal or sketch, do some kind of mental and emotional release so that you can let go of everything that happened during the day. And the reason is because we don't want to carry the stress and anxiety into the next day. So establishing some kind of routine and ritual and practice, it can also be something physical like stretching or meditating, listening to meditative music, taking a nice bath, those kind of things that help us to even physically relax so that we can allow the mind to release and rest. Okay, let's see. Number 2 is to make time to nurture your body before bed every night. Again, I mentioned some like taking a bath. Water therapy is very good for the body. Light exercise and stretching, prayer and meditation. But again, we want to keep and learn to establish this harmony between spirit, soul, and body. And it starts with simple practices like these to get us in alignment, okay? Which will in turn pour into the oneness of self, which will in turn pour into our natural creative flow, which will allow us to be our optimum and our healthiest self. So I hope this has helped you. I look forward to meeting with you guys next week, where we will discuss another of these 8 foundational pillars. Those of you that are interested in doing one-to-one creative coaching with me, I am very available right now, and I would be happy to help you along. And I love you guys very much, and I'll talk to you soon.